is much smaller compared to their business and compared to their private sector. So in that situation, if they already have, so some I've seen some agencies, state of Texas agencies, where they were leveraging the vendors from the beginning, like not just for servers or procurement of servers, but also for other things like other IT needs, application development or implementation. So from that perspective, their model was they will start with the RFP, and the RFP will typically include, sometimes it will include the procurement and the support, including the support person. Sometimes it will have two different RFPs, one for the server, one for the support. And in support meaning from the support person's standpoint. So that is a separate path. But for the private organizations, I've seen, especially large ones, they have their own IT internally, and they like to keep their knowledge inside the house, as well as they wanted to make sure that the design is meeting their business goals, and it is dynamically changing, especially the private sector, where quarterly the goals change, and then they have to meet the numbers and things like that. So they have to maintain that expertise on in-house rather than depending on outside agencies. So that's why I said it really depends.
Got it. Thank you. And to what extent do organizations have corporate standards for the types of servers that they purchase?
Okay, so I've seen some organizations, I would say from the enterprise architecture and IT infrastructure architecture standpoint, if they're really mature organizations, and I've seen some of them like that, if they're really mature organizations, they will have a very, very good corporate standards and governance process. So when I say process, they will have a very good documented server deployment architecture diagrams, scalability analysis, performance analysis, past performance models, usability models, and such. So all of that will be well documented, and if they have that kind of maturity, then there will be a good design document before even they start thinking about procuring any servers and hardware. So that's the best case scenario. But a lot of times the situation is in between, not the very best case. They may have some, they may not have the complete knowledge about what they want, and sometimes it's also driven by the business. Sometimes the business is not really sure about the usability, how many users will grow, scalability requirements, or non-functional requirements such as performance or type of user base. Sometimes organizations expand suddenly within 1 year in different territories and such. So from that perspective, it's a very dynamic process. So it really depends. But if I've seen organizations that have very, very matured, it's good to have that kind of skill set at least, even if it is not, the process is not defined. If you have the skill set in-house, or even with hiring external vendors, I'm not saying vendors meaning like a turnkey responsibility, but hiring some consultants, point-to-point basis, wherever there's a lack of expertise. The organizations I've seen organizations take the advantage of that skill set and then use it as needed when they procure the servers.
Got it. And have you ever been in a situation where you had to purchase outside of the standard server catalog? And if that is the case, what is an example of a use case or even the logic behind doing so?
Sure. So there are a lot of times where we have to go outside the standards. So just as an example, a typical new data center where we had a deep evaluation process with multiple vendors, and there's a cost is a big concern, and cost and support model and the total cost of ownership and all that is a big concern. We try to start with a standard catalog. However, there are some exceptions. So the exceptions meaning sometimes the deployment model may say, hey, in this kind of case, let's say this application may expand twice in the next 6 months in terms of the user base. So there are some, let's say 10% of the applications that we identify as a key business applications or some non-standard applications that may experience exponential growth in near future. So we identify some deployment architecture side of the entire farm as a non-standard part, and then in that case, we rather than relying on the standard catalog,